here today to have a conversation about a recent professional development opportunity here in the Office of Ideas. It was the Assignment Design Institute. It was a 3-day experience. And some of the topics that we talked about was making more transparent, universal, and relevant assignments for students. And so we're just going to have this roundtable conversation, and we'll get introductions out of the way at the top and then get into the first question. So my name is William Hardaway. I'm an instructional designer here in the Office of Ideas.
Jason McGinsey, also an instructional designer here in Ideas.
And I'm Sean Gordon, an assistant professor in the English department.
So Sean, you recently did the Assignment Design Institute. So the first question we have for you is, why did you decide to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I had already been thinking about redesigning some assignments after my first year at Fresno State. You know, I didn't have the language exactly, which I've now picked up from the Institute, but around issues of relevance, certainly universal design, accessibility. I think a lot about relevance for my English majors. They sometimes are concerned about the relevance of their degrees for how they're going to apply their degrees to their careers. Personally, I don't think they need to worry too much about that, but they are worried about it. So I want to have the language and the tools to help them think through the questions they have, and make their degree work for them as much as possible. So I was thinking about that already. I also think a lot about assessment. I sort of consider myself someone who would be better off without grades, or I think my pedagogy is better off without grades in some way. I would maybe call myself a grade abolitionist or something like that. And there's a lot of evidence that I already knew about as to why grades are not such an effective mode of assessment. But I didn't really have some of the language or tools for bringing that home and bringing that to the classroom. And so I wanted to learn more about that. And I figured we would cover it in the Assignment Design Institute, which we did. And that was great. And then I guess a final reason is, like I said, I kind of already wanted to tweak some assignments to make them especially relevant to Fresno State students. And this seemed like a really perfect time right at the end of the semester. Get some work done on those assignments, sort of build on the momentum of the end of the semester to get some work done that I already wanted to do this summer, and to be supported both in community and from you both and your colleagues in the office, and financially as well. It was pretty great. So yeah, I guess those are some of my reasons I signed up.
It's interesting you're talking about your students who are going into English as a field, or maybe not even going into English as a field, but they're definitely majoring in English. And I was a philosophy major, and I feel like in the arts and humanities we have that conundrum of like, what I'm not a engineer or like I don't have a job that says philosopher, and so what do I do with my bachelor's degree? So how did, like, on that topic of relevance, like, what are some ways you've thought of so far to give them that career relevance?
Well, I tell them about my journey to becoming an English professor, which passed through lots of different jobs. Lots of different jobs before grad school, lots of different jobs during my PhD. So I just tell them about that. And, one thing that I really focus in on is my previous life in publishing. It was really just a handful of years that I worked in publishing, but I like to just give them examples so they have ideas about what they can do. And, sometimes they don't really, they hear about, they know books get published because they read them, but they don't necessarily know how they get made. So talking about that, editorial, managing editorial, how a publishing house works, giving them something to envision. But there's also a lot of research out there about what English majors can do in their careers. And, as it turns out, it's just about everything. And I try to tell them, don't worry about it. Like, you have these amazing skills, and we talk about what those are, whether they're communication skills, writing skills, critical thinking skills, rhetorical skills, what have you, and how they can be applied in all sorts of fields. They'll go on and get specialized training in other areas when necessary and when needed. There's a great infographic that the publisher W.W. Norton has put out that's just like, it's kind of a skills-based infographic, like for English majors in particular, but it's kind of like, are you really into writing argumentative prose? These are some fields you could go, imagine these fields. And it's just kind of this almost Venn diagram kind of flow chart sort of thing. Are you really interested in critical thinking? You could go into these fields. Are you just really into reading? You could go into these fields. So I've shared that with students. So those are some of the ways I try to make it relevant for them, but I also just kind of tell them, like, why, I ask them why they're English majors. They love to read, they love to write, they love art. And I say, well, whatever work you do, you're not reduced to your job or whatever. Just, continue to be a reader, continue to be a writer, continue to be a thinker. Those are lifelong pursuits, and they'll make your life more interesting at the very least to continue to do that stuff. And whatever you do for a job is what you do for a job, is what you do for money, is what you do because, that's the world we live in. But reading, writing, thinking, talking about books, being in community with people around literature and art and stuff, that'll sustain you for your life. So yeah.
And it's a good reminder for them that college is not just a job preparation program.
Yeah.
But that's some of that language, I think, has really taken over a lot of higher education, that it's career preparation as opposed to the pursuit of intellectual life or artistic life or whatever, which it's both of those things, or all of those things. But
we're not seeing how those things can be career preparation. It takes a different look at that. But let's get back to the Assignment Design Institute. So we're talking about designing assignments. So let's talk about what assignment or assignments did you take a look at during the event, and what did you find were sort of pinch points that students had that you needed to tweak towards, or areas that you felt needed to improve on one or two assignments that you were looking at during that time?
Yeah, I ended up looking mainly at a discussion leader assignment. So, I think it's really important for students to help lead discussion. It makes a class really student-centered. I also think that it's important for students to have an opportunity to contribute, I guess you could say, verbally or something like that in class. I don't always require students to talk in class, because there's multiple means of assessment. They don't always need to talk. There's writing, there's many ways that students can demonstrate learning, etc. But I do think it's important in this field, in my field, to get people talking. So I have this discussion leader assignment where students have to come in and or actually they have to submit questions to me about something we've read, a work of literature, poetry, short stories, whatever it might be, and write up some discussion questions and run them by me ahead of time, and then bring them into class and talk to their peers about them, as present them to their peers. So it's not a formal presentation, but the reason I like to do it this way is I think that sometimes there's too much of an emphasis that students need to have, like the answer, some assertion, some claim, some argument about a work of literature. But I think that it's just as, and we practice that when we write essays for the most part, but also just coming at a work of literature through questions, and learning how to ask questions rather than just make assertions and arguments, I think is a useful skill in our field as well. So I don't really remember exactly why I picked that one, but I've had some, I guess you could say, pinch points in creating that assignment. It's usually really successful, but students don't always take full advantage of what it means to kind of hold the space for an hour. Whether that's about thinking of themselves as teachers, how should I arrange the classroom, what information do I need to present to my classmates before I get into the questions, things like that. So I really wanted to rethink how to do that. I also wanted to rethink how to get students who are quieter or more shy or whatever, how to make them more comfortable during the process, because I thought there were perhaps some accessibility problems or potential problems with the assignment as I had run it previously. So it was really helpful to map it out, the assignment map, both the simple one and then the more involved, I forget exactly what you called it, but the more complex one that we did the second time around was really helpful, because I had to really think about what it was like from their perspective before, during, and after, and rethink it from my own perspective. And then in the complex map, I really enjoyed thinking about who else on campus, other stakeholders, could be involved in this kind of thing, because it's a public speaking issue at the core. How to deal with students' anxieties, how to get maybe their other classmates involved in the project, just who else is involved in this kind of thing, or in this kind of assignment. So I hope I'm being clear in talking about that assignment, but that's what I chose to remap, or to map for the Institute. And then, I have a couple of other assignments that I've been thinking about in the ensuing weeks, and then I'm gonna submit at the end of the semester. And one is a group project. I'm gonna be teaching online in the fall, and for my American literature students, I sometimes do this thing called a keyword essay, where students in small groups track a keyword in the readings. Like the keyword could be freedom, or it could be colonialism or something like that, and they track it throughout the semester and then write just an essay about where they've seen it, but they write it together. I think it really works well in online teaching, and I started doing it when we were in quarantine and teaching on Zoom. So I'm gonna map that assignment again and see how I can improve it for the fall semester, and then I'm probably going to submit a third assignment as well, but I haven't quite decided what it's going to be. But I've just sort of been like, the keyword project has been sort of percolating. I'm thinking like how I would map it out, and I think I'm going to do that for the Institute when we submit new maps in August.
What was your experience like as a participant? We had y'all working in groups. You're on the student side of the table for this experience. What was the experience like for you participating in the Institute?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was it went by so quickly, to be honest. The 2 day, we had 2 days in the office, and then 1 day just reviewing resources and writing up a presentation. I actually ended up I knew kind of everyone would do sort of or I thought everyone would sort of do a brief PowerPoint presentation. So I wrote like a short essay for mine. But I thought, hey, the gist of this whole thing is multiple means of assessment and all that. I'm going to do it how I would do it, and do it in good faith. Like I reviewed a lot of resources and wrote up what I thought about them, synthesized them and stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I also made some so I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. It was really nice to be validated around some things again that I had already been thinking about, and assessment's a big one, but also relevancy and universal design. Like reviewing those resources on that Wednesday, I guess, was really, I just learned a lot in a very short amount of time and felt very validated, both from reading through those materials and also through all the great presentations you did during the days we were present, we were in person. It was also just fun to meet people around campus. Like I made some new connections. I met some people I hadn't met before, got to catch up with some people I know already, and made some connections that I think will be fruitful, for collaborations and stuff down the line, even if they don't have to do with the institute itself. I realized, some of us realized that we have mutual interests, even if we're in different fields. And so, it was a good opportunity to meet people from different departments. But yeah, my experience was pretty straightforward. I was really involved in the small group I was in. It was a big group. It got kind of loud in there sometimes, and a little, which means that people were very enthusiastic and animated. I didn't necessarily volunteer too much to the full group, just because, it felt like we could have been there for weeks doing this institute. So it was just like, there's a lot to say, there's a lot to chew on. But this isn't much of a punctuation mark, but positive experience. It was good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. And I really learned a lot.
So like, what were the other disciplines at the table, and where did you see the intersections?
Yeah, there was someone in my group who I don't want to get her name incorrect. Hatun, I believe, who works on issues of stuttering and so forth. And I've been reading a poet recently named Jerome Ellis, who writes a lot about his own experiences with stuttering. And he writes really interesting poetry that visualizes the stuttering. And I was like, Hatun, I told Hatun about this person, and she's like, oh, I know him, or I know of him, but I didn't know he wrote poetry so much. He's just like, she knows him as a activist around issues of stuttering and so forth. But I was like, oh, well, we need to, this is just one example, but we need to like connect about that, because man, it'd be really cool to do something where we could get him to come to campus or something, and talk both about poetry to my literature students, and talk about advocacy around stuttering and so forth for Hatun students. And so I don't know what'll come of that, but it just was a cool connection that just comes up from literally just getting to know one another.
I love that connection. That sounded so powerful and so serendipitous, right? That
yeah,
think.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I shared what I know about Jerome Ellis's work, because I have his book, and he's a musician as well. So I shared some of that stuff and with Hatun, but we're gonna follow up at some point. But yeah, it was a I like that space in the Office of Ideas. Just you can be in these little clusters, but then you do feel like a part of a whole. whole classroom. And it was interesting to see what people researched during that asynchronous time. AI was like really on people's minds, and you know what that's going to do for the status of the assignments. Because if a robot can do all of our students' assignments, what's going to happen? But generally, I don't think people are that concerned about it. It was refreshing that your approach to it was, not that I expected any different, but it was refreshing that your approach to it was play around with it, see what it does. Like, you know, you reduce your fear of something by familiarizing yourself with it, and also check out its potentials, its possibilities, you know, what it's useful for, and its limitations too, because it's not, you know, it's not all that. And I give my students essays. I write prompts for them that are really specific to things we've talked about in class and whatever. So they're almost like AI, you know, invulnerable, or like AI immune or whatever, but probably not really. But you know, last semester, we just ran my prompts through AI to see what would happen. And they were like, oh, that's it? Okay. Like that's all it can come up with, you know? So I'm like, well, you know, I'm sure if you played around with it a lot more, you'd get some more interesting answers, but then you'd just be doing as much work as writing the essay itself. And whatever, if that's what you want to do, let me know. You know, I'm not, you know, like that's, we're all going to be, you know, using AI a little bit more in our lives, but it's also like not going to take over all of the intellectual work and artistic creative work that students do when they write essays. So anyway, yeah, you all just took a really just open-minded kind of approach to all the topics, and yeah, I appreciate it. And having to work with people from all over campus who create so many different kinds of assignments, that must have been difficult for you all, just to think about how to format an institute for people all over campus. I'd be curious to hear you both speak of, you know, how your experience of it was and how your approach to designing the institute was, with that in mind, that there's just like a huge diversity of, you know, departments represented and stuff.
Well, yeah, we could talk about that after the interview, and we just want to close it here because you talked about how powerful the space was, and it was pretty powerful. And we want to thank you for giving us this space right now to interview you and pick your brain about assignment design, and hopefully we'll continue to hear from you and the great stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, William. Yeah, thanks, Jason.
To learn more, visit our website, academics.fresnostate.edu/ideas, or contact us to share your story, ideas@mail.fresnostate.edu.